So my name is Minoti and I work in international student support at the University of Exeter. Our team are all trained immigration advisors and we are experts in student visa applications in particular, but we also advise on the graduate visa. So alongside this presentation, we have lots of information on our graduate visa webpage, so please do look through them. Another useful source of information on the graduate visa is the UKISA website. UKISA are the UK Council for International Student Affairs, and we will link to their website below as well. So what is the graduate visa? Well, the graduate visa is a 2-year visa for undergraduates and master's students, or 3 years for PhD graduates, and it allows you to work or look for work in the UK without having to be sponsored by an employer or the university. The visa is granted for a fixed period of time and you cannot apply for less or more time than this. The eligibility criteria is straightforward, but it's also quite strict. So we will look into this in more detail in a minute. But for now, I'd like to just highlight that the eligibility is not automatic. So you will need to meet certain requirements. Also, it's a one-time only visa, which means that you can only apply for the graduate visa once. So, if you're currently an undergraduate student thinking about either working or doing a master's course next, or a master's student trying to decide between a PhD or work, you really do need to decide what you would like to do first, and perhaps wait until closer to your visa expiry date before you apply for the graduate visa, when you have a clearer idea of your plans. And lastly, just a reminder that you should not apply for the graduate visa before you meet the eligibility requirements, as if you apply too early, your visa will be refused. Okay, so today we're going to look at 3 different areas in detail. First, I'll talk about how to apply for the graduate visa, and this includes the eligibility criteria I mentioned earlier, whether or not your dependents can apply, and where and when to apply. Next, I will go through what you need to prepare, the supporting documents you will need to submit, and how you go about completing the application form, the costs and processing times. And then finally, I will talk you through the conditions or rules surrounding the graduate visa once it has been granted. So in this section, we'll look at how to be eligible for this visa, which is also linked to the timing of your application. So firstly, in order to be eligible to apply, you must be in the UK on a student or Tier 4 visa and you must apply before it expires. Next, your degree must be awarded. So the university needs to notify the Home Office that you have successfully completed your degree. When this happens, you will receive an email from the university to let you know. You have to wait for this notification before you submit a visa application. If you apply for the graduate visa before you receive this email, it is likely that your application will be refused. The third requirement is that you need to have been physically studying in the UK on a student visa. The minimum amount of time is 12 months if your course is longer than 12 months. So 12 months applies to undergraduate students, PhD students and 2-year master's students. Or you need to be in the UK for the entire duration of your course if your course is 12 months or less. So this applies to our 9-month and 12-month master's students. And finally, if you have been sponsored by your government or an international scholarship agency, then you will need to make sure that you get their permission in writing in order to apply for the graduate visa. Okay, so I think the first and last requirements on this list are pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about the second and third requirements. So your degree must be awarded. These are approximate times when different groups of students will be awarded. So for undergraduate students and 9-month master's students, you will be awarded in late June or maybe the early July. September start master's students will be awarded in November of the following year. And January start master's students will be awarded in March of the following year. So for PhD students, you will be awarded after you have submitted your corrected thesis, which is after your viva and corrections. So as you can see from these dates, it can take a little while after receiving your results to actually be awarded. So it's roughly about 3 weeks. When you're awarded, the university does a few checks and then notifies UK Visas and Immigration that you have successfully completed your degree. At the same time, the university will send you an email to let you know this has happened. So you will need to wait for that notification email before submitting a graduate visa application. If you know you've been awarded and your visa is due to expire quite soon, please do get in touch with us, as we will take a look at your individual record to see what's going on. So that's if you've been awarded and you haven't received this email. So there can be some delays to being awarded, for example, if you have referred or deferred assessments, and this can push your awarding to later on. Okay, so we're going to look at a timeline in a little bit more detail to see how this all fits together. So this timeline shows when you can expect to apply for your visa if you complete your studies and are awarded on time, or even a little later than planned. So remember I told you earlier that you need to have a valid visa and that you need to wait for the notification email that is sent to you by the university. So this is your application window. The key dates are the UKVI notification email and your visa expiry date. Now, if you have referred deferred assessments, this can affect your eligibility to apply for a graduate visa. This is because you might receive your award after your visa expiry date, and there are only a limited number of situations when you will be able to extend or apply for a new student visa to cover the reassessments. In that situation, you will not be eligible to apply for a graduate visa. So for example, a master's student who is given an extension or asked to resubmit their dissertation or coursework later than planned might mean that their results and award are not released until close to or after their visa expiry date, and they are not awarded before the visa expires. So therefore are not eligible to apply for the graduate visa. So to check when you will be awarded following any referred or deferred assessments, or for more specific advice on the type and location of these assessments, you will need to speak to your hub info point, as we're not able to advise on or influence this. So we'll post a link below that has information about retaking exams or modules that might be of interest to you. Now let's look at the third requirement, study in the UK. So UKVI are very strict about the amount of time they expect you to have studied in the UK. If you're on a course of 12 months or less, so Exeter's 9 and 12-month master's programs, you are expected to have studied your whole course in the UK. Students on programs longer than 12 months, so undergraduates, PhDs and two-year master's students, are expected to study in the UK for at least 12 months of their course. So this does not include vacation periods when you are allowed to travel, which we will talk about next. The study in the UK requirement does not mean that you can never leave the UK during your studies, but we would recommend that you limit your travel to times when you are not required to attend classes, like Christmas and Easter breaks. If you do travel during term time, make sure that your academic department are aware of your absence and that this time has been authorized by them. For dissertation modules, if you are not required to have in-person contact, longer absences from the UK are likely to be acceptable. You should know that you will need to declare your travel history on the graduate visa application form. UKVI have said that they do not intend to carefully scrutinize this travel history, but we have to advise that there is a possibility that they will, and that they will question any long absences during your program dates. So at the moment, we do not believe that they are likely to do this, but you do need to be aware of the possibility. If you want to avoid any risk to your graduate visa application, you should plan that any absences from the UK during term time, including your dissertation module, are kept short. We will not be able to comment on individual travel plans and travel dates. So we're often asked about missing classes or travel during dissertation modules, and as you'll know, part of your student visa conditions is that you attend and engage with your studies. So the university will confirm that you meet the study in the UK requirement for graduate visa eligibility as long as you have met all attendance and engagement requirements for your modules, and if needed for your program, attended the in-person check-ins. So we have more details about attendance and engagement on our webpage for you to look through, and I'll put a link below. So the graduate visa does allow you to bring dependents to apply with you in the UK. However, they do need to be in the UK first as your student visa dependents. So if you are eligible to bring dependents on your student visa, and your dependent partner and children are currently outside the UK, they will first need to submit student dependent visa applications to join you in the UK, and then apply with you to switch to the graduate visa. If they are in the UK in another visa category, for example, as a student or a work visa, they will need to switch to a student dependent visa first before applying with you as a graduate dependent. If you need more information on preparing for a student dependent application to bring your dependents to the UK, you will need individual advice and you will need to get in touch with us. So we'll put our contact details in below as well. So where and when can you apply? The application process is pretty straightforward. You can only apply inside the UK after you have been awarded your degree, but before your student visa expires. So it's an online application form, which also takes you through the process of paying the immigration health surcharge and the visa fee. You only need to submit your graduate visa application before your visa expires. It is not a problem that you do not receive your new visa back before your student visa expiry date. As long as you submit before this date, you are covered by the terms and conditions of your student visa till the graduate visa is granted. So now let's look at what you need to prepare and how to submit your application and the costs involved. So most students will not need to submit any documents with their visa applications, but there's a list of things you will need. So you will need your CAS number from your last student visa application, and we will send you a reminder of this in the notification email you get after you have been awarded. Next, you'll need your passport and your BRP card if you have one. And lastly, if you've been sponsored by a government or international scholarship agency in the past 12 months, you will need a letter from them giving you permission to apply for the graduate visa. So the application form is a lot more straightforward than the student visa application form. To set it up, you need to start by scanning your BRP card using the UK Immigration ID Check app. If for any reason you can't use the app, there is an instruction on there to avoid the app. Then you'll be directed to answer questions and can refer to our application form guide to help you with this. Once you've filled in the application form, you'll be instructed to make two payments. The first is the immigration health surcharge, and the second is the visa application fee. Once you've made the second payment, you have officially submitted your visa application. If you have not been able to use the UK Immigration ID Check app, you'll be instructed to book a biometrics appointment at this stage. And lastly, you'll need to upload scans of any documents you're required to submit. So let's look at the costs. Unlike the student visa application, there is no requirement here to show any evidence of finances as part of the graduate visa application. The immigration help surcharge is £1,035 per person per year. So this works out to £2,070 for the 2-year visa for undergraduate and master's students, and £3,105 for PhD graduates for the 3-year visa. These amounts need to be paid in full by credit or debit card at the point of application, and you can't choose to apply for anything less than the full period you're eligible for. So for example, as a PhD graduate, you have to pay for the 3 years. You can't just apply for 1 or 2 years. After this, there is a visa application fee of £822 per applicant. Again, this needs to be paid by credit or debit card at the point of application. So this all adds up to quite a lot of money, and more so if you've completed a PhD and you have dependents. So it is definitely something to start thinking about and planning for well in advance. The application processing time is up to 8 weeks, but we know that it's usually quicker in reality, especially if you've used the app. It's also worth noting that there's currently no priority application service for the graduate visa. So you need to remember that you have to stay in the UK while your application is pending. If you leave while the application is being processed, this technically withdraws your application. The type of visa you will receive will depend on whether your nationality is on the visa national list and if you've used the UK Immigration ID Check app. So if your nationality is on the visa national list and you have used the UK Immigration ID Check app, then you will receive an e-visa, and depending on when you apply, you may also receive a BRP card. And this is because BRP cards are being phased out at the end of this year. If your nationality is not on the visa national list and you have used the UK Immigration ID Check app, you will only receive an e-visa. If you did not use the UK Immigration ID Check app, regardless of your nationality, at the moment you will only receive a BRP card. But we should have further updates on this later on this year as BRP cards are phased out. So once you have your visa, what can and can't you do? So there are certain conditions attached to the graduate visa that you need to be aware of. The first, as with your student visa, is that you're not allowed to access public funds. This includes benefits and tax credits from the UK government. There are also some limits on the type of work and study that you can and cannot do. And so let's look at this in more detail. Work conditions first. Well, you can basically do anything other than working as a professional sports person or coach. You are allowed to work full-time or part-time. You can use the visa to do an internship or to volunteer, or you can be self-employed, freelance, or you can do a combination of all of these things. You can work full-time hours once you have submitted your graduate visa application and while it's being processed. But the current advice is that you should not start a permanent full-time contract until you have received your new graduate visa. If you are starting your own business, you should not register your new business till you have received your graduate visa as well. So study on this visa. Although study is allowed on a graduate visa, it is very heavily restricted. Essentially, you are not allowed to study any program that would qualify for a student visa. So this means you can't use your graduate visa to study a full-time undergraduate, postgraduate, or PhD program. You can't study a part-time postgraduate or PhD program either. But you can study a part-time undergraduate program if you chose to do so, or some professional courses and other short courses like evening classes or online study. So the best way to check would be to ask the course provider if you can study that particular course on a graduate visa. Because this is a one-time only visa, you really need to make sure that you understand this condition and make suitable plans. So thank you for attending this webinar. Please do have a look at the graduate visa website and the other links that we have put below. If you do have any questions, we run regular online drop-ins, and you can book into one of these to meet with an advisor online for a quick chat, or you can email International Student Support at the email address here, and we will be more than happy to help. Goodbye.